Thank you ever so much for joining the webinar this morning. We're going to be talking about the 23 must-haves for your website in 2023. So hopefully this is a highly relevant topic for you as we look towards next year. Just a very brief introduction to myself. My name is Will. I founded a digital agency called Webbox back in 2008. And we work with clients of all shapes and sizes to help them with website development projects, UX design, and paid advertising. And it's really the insights we've gained over the last 14 years. And it's the kind of data that we've analyzed, which has brought all of this content to life. And I'm fortunate enough to present that to you today. Now, just a couple of quick things before we begin. After this session, we'll make sure that you get a copy of the recording and the slides. So there's no need to kind of make too thorough notes. We'll make sure you get a copy of those. We'll leave a time at the end as well for some questions. So throughout the talk, if you want to put some questions in the chat, please feel free to do that, and I'll do my best to answer them at the end. And then a little caveat, which is I'm going to cover this topic quite quickly and broadly this morning. And that's because there's lots to get through. I'm going to move at quite a pace, so I'm going to apologize in advance for that. But hopefully it gives you a flavor as to some of the things that we recommend that you incorporate on your website. And if you want to follow up that conversation or talk in more detail about one specific point, then we're very happy to do that. Also, I'd love to get your feedback, so please join the conversation online. Our kind of social tags can be found there on screen. Now, you might ask, why does this kind of matter? Why does it actually matter to invest in redeveloping your website or enhancing your website? And actually, I've just put some stats on screen, which kind of make that point really. So the first one is 94% of users to a website will make an impression on your business straight away, just based on the website's design. So it's really important that the website reflects your business and looks current and ultimately exudes your values. Now, the next one on the far right is all to do with the chatbot market. And this is AI-driven chatbots is something we're seeing a lot of at the moment. Love them or hate them, they are very big. And the chatbot market is now going to be worth 881 million by 2025. So something that we can't ignore. Bottom left is about conversion rates. And actually, if your user experience on your website is what we would deem superior, then actually you're probably going to get an increase in conversion rates of 400%. So this stuff matters in terms of how people engage with your business online. And then in the bottom right, we've got that stat about people returning to your website if it's mobile friendly. And actually they're 74% more likely to return if you've really considered the mobile experience. Now, hopefully none of those stats surprise you, but actually it should give us a reason as to why we need to look at our websites on a regular basis to see how we can enhance them further. Now, this talk I'm giving this morning is split into two halves. So the first half is all about design and content. So if that's kind of maybe your area of expertise, then hopefully those points will be really relevant to you. The second half is all about marketing and experience. So we're going to break it into two halves just to kind of pull these things together so you can see some common themes throughout the 23. So without any further ado, let's get straight into it. We're going to look at the first half, which is design and content. Now, the first must-have is having a mobile-first design approach. And this is in relation to when you create a new website. Now, if you're looking to create a new website at the moment, this is a completely different way to go about the design phase of that project. Now, don't get this confused with having a mobile-friendly website. That's not what I'm referring to here. This is actually about having a different approach to the design phase. And forces you and encourages you to kind of look at the mobile experience first before the desktop experience. It actually, you would kind of, I guess, work with an agency or work with your designer to actually create designs for your mobile and tablet devices before considering what the design would look like on a desktop. Now, I must say, there's a few things to kind of note here. Now, if you do this, you want to make sure that you have what we call a thumb-friendly mobile design. What that means in practice is making sure that your buttons and call to actions and main content can be clicked on with your thumb. And obviously the graphic on the previous slide showed those areas. And also it's important to do this because actually Google is now a mobile first search index. So Google look at your mobile site before your desktop site and often rank you based on that. So it is ultra important. Thirdly, it's important because of page speed. If your website takes this approach when it's created, it's highly likely that it'll load quicker and your page speed will be far improved. But the caveat at the end of all of this is actually you might want to decide with your agency or designer whether this is the best approach for you. It's not for everyone, and sometimes people do like to see what a website will look like on a desktop device before a mobile, and that might just be because of their habits or because of just their browsing device choice. But look, it's not for everyone, so you need to make that conscious decision up front if you are to start a website project. And number two is all about having a clear proposition on the website. Now, if I said to you, what does this company do? I'm pretty sure most of you would say, I've got no idea. You know, when you land on this website, there is no indication really as to what it is that this company does or offers or sells. Who knows, right? And until really looking into it further, you wouldn't know. Now, we want to really challenge that because though this sounds really elementary, so many websites don't have a clear proposition above the fold. So don't leave your user guessing as to what it is that you offer. Make sure that you have a really clear proposition above the fold on your homepage. If you want to have a look at our website, webbox.digital, hopefully we've ticked that box and you'll see in one sentence what it is that we do. Now, we call that creating a killer one-liner, and it might be worth working with a strategist or a copywriter or someone to actually make sure you absolutely nail that one-liner. It's really important that you can do that because online, you don't have the option to have this kind of conversation and you don't have the option to kind of explain it, you know, over a coffee. You've got to make sure the users understood what your business does very quickly. And obviously the benefit of this is to reduce the bounce rates on your homepage. So ultimately, if you have a clear proposition, we see from the data that people will stick around longer, they will scroll down further, and your bounce rate will be decreased. So there's you know, obvious signs as to why this should be done on your site. Now, number three is brand transparency. And I just want to show a graphic as to how one e-commerce retailer has gone about this. So they've got a picture of their product and they've got signposts to how the product is made and the materials used within that product. Now, obviously, UX, it has to be a silent teacher. You know, we have to make sure that the experience, the user experience on your website guides people through your services and products. And it is really important that you can engage with someone on the other side of the screen on a person-to-person level rather than just businesses doing business with businesses. Okay, ultimately, this has to come back to the fundamental, which is people buy people. And ultimately, they want to know how your business operates. Now, some examples as to how we kind of do that in reality can be found at the bottom. So we've got, for a service-based business, making sure that you have the ability to meet the team. Who's actually going to be running the project or working with you? Give them that insight and let them buy into your team. On the other hand, you might have a product-based business. And it's really important, like I've shown on the previous slide, to maybe break down how that product's made and kind of share the history and the story behind that. So there's just some examples as to how you might go about doing this in reality, but really important to have a look at your website and kind of think about whether your brand is being transparent in how it comes across online. A good way to maybe help with that is ask someone outside of the business to have a look at your website and give their thoughts on how the service is delivered or how the product is made. Now, number 4 is all about storytelling. And I've just got a short video which kind of demonstrates that. Now, in this video, you can see that as the user scrolls down the page, they get a lot of parallax imagery, text boxes come up, things are animated, there's videos and what have you. Now, what it does is it encourages the user to continue scrolling so that you don't want to kind of stop, you want to find out more. And that way in which we can tell a story online, but through animation, is really powerful. But not only just powerful, it comes back to that principle I've just talked about, which is ultimately people buy people, and they want to know the story behind the business. You know, when I meet with clients, I can talk about that story of starting the agency back in 2008 from a spare bedroom in our house whilst I was halfway through university. And I can kind of build that story and keep that going to present day of where we are now. And you'll find that story on our own on our website. And I think actually people buy into those stories because they like the authenticity around it. There's no bragging, there's no kind of puffing the chest out. It's a real life story as to how someone has created a business or an opportunity or a product. And that's exciting, and people like to find out what's behind the business. Now, we really encourage you to do that in an animated way, maybe using imagery or video or whatever you have at your disposal. But it's really important that that's done in an interactive way rather than just through, 1,000 words of copy, which, if we're honest, very few people are going to read. Now, number 5 is all about a solution-first approach. And Dropbox do that really well. So if you have a look at the Dropbox website, they don't talk about the services they offer, but they talk about the solutions and problems that they help fix. So what we're saying here is don't just sell your services. Don't just say we offer web development, UX design, and paid advertising. Because for some people, they might not know what those services are. They might not know how that applies to what they're looking for. But instead, if you turn that around and you say, right, let's talk about the solutions and problems that we fix, people can relate to that. So in our instance, we might say, we help integrate your CRM with your website, or we help you get more conversions on your website. And people relate to those and they say, that's something I'm struggling with at the moment. And then they kind of go through the journey from there. So what we're saying is don't necessarily get rid of a list of services on your website if that's what you have at the moment, but alongside that, have a list of solutions or problems that you fix, because it's another entry point to get people down the funnel in your website. So definitely a place for having these side by side. Okay, moving on to the next one, and this is dynamic content. Now, I'll just show a quick example of this. So if I just click play on this video, so you can see here, there's a user on the left and a user on the right. Now, when the Emma, user on the left, comes on the website, she sees a particular version of the site. When Joanna on the right comes to the site, she sees a different version of the site. Now, really important to understand, I guess, at square one, that actually not all users are the same, right? Every user is expecting something different, and they might have come from a different place as well. So they might have come from an ad or an organic social post or a Google search or whatever it might be. Everyone's come from a different place with a different requirement. And actually, we need to understand that and serve them relevant content on the website. And that's how dynamic content is so popular, because what it does is it learns from that data, it learns from where they've come from, it learns from what they're doing on your website, what they're reading, how they're interacting, and it starts to adapt the content. Now, in simple terms, I'm going to use BBC News as an example. So on the BBC News app, If you start reading lots of news about sport, for example, it will serve you up more information which is related to that category. Now, another way to do this is what Apple do on their website. So on Apple's website, they track even down to how quickly you interact and scroll down the pages. And if they find that you're scrolling really quickly, they move the animations on much quicker. So that next time the page loads, they might reduce that animation time or remove it completely because they know that you just want to get to where you're going. So they have a sense that you know what you're looking for. Whereas actually, if you don't, then they want you to have that experience and see the full animation. Now, the benefits in doing this is obviously increasing the conversion rate. It's getting more people to fill out an inquiry form, download an ebook, whatever that might be for you. So it's really important to do this. And the technology under the hood is very similar to that of what we call A/B split testing. So if you've heard of that or do that at the moment, this is a very similar process. Now, a little top tip to leave you with is if you're looking to implement this on your website, it can be quite a complicated thing. So actually to plumb into a tool such as Personalize could help you create this functionality and start serving more relevant content to your users without having to do a lot of heavy lifting from by your web developer. Okay, moving on to number 7. This is micro interactions. Now, a quick example of this is the button that you can see on screen now. So you click on the button, it downloads a file, it shows you the progress, and then it gives you the open option. Now, this is all about actually giving a more tactile experience to your website, because I'm sure we've all been there. We go onto a website, we click a button, or we kind of interact in some way, and we're not sure if the website's doing anything. So you click a button, nothing happens, maybe for like 10 seconds, or maybe you complete a form, you click submit, again, nothing happens, and you're just left unsure until something finally loads or happens. And actually, in some instances, maybe nothing is going to happen. Now, that's a really odd feeling for a user, leaves them slightly underwhelmed. So to boost interactivity and to give them a much better experience, we really encourage you to look at micro interactions. And these can be applied to buttons and forms and to other areas of the site to give the user a more tactile experience when they're browsing around the website. So really simple to put in, but highly effective. Now, number 8 is animated cursors. I'll just give you a little example of this. So you can see on this website, as you hover over the navigation links, you get different imagery popping up in the background. This is just one example as to how to do this. And to be honest, it's probably a bit more of a brash example than others we've come across. Now, back in the day, you would have said, well, this is really gimmicky, right? But actually not anymore. It can now really aid the experience of the user on your website. How? Well, ultimately, it makes them want to engage more. It makes them want to hover over more buttons or click and to see what happens. And they get far more engaged with navigating around your website than without these. But also, I would kind of challenge us to do this if it's going to help the experience. So don't do it as a gimmick, okay? Because there's little point in doing that. But actually, if you can include a hover, for example, over a video, where the mouse cursor changes to maybe the word play when you hover over a video, that would encourage the user to click on it and play the video. And then whilst the video is playing, the cursor would change to the word pause. And then obviously when the user's ready, they pause the video. That kind of thing aids experience and adds value to your website rather than obviously it just being a bit gimmicky. So I know this is a bit of a Marmite point, but one I think that we can all implement in one way or another. Now, number 9 is just to surface a few design trends that we've seen, but also that we predict will happen or continue to happen next year. So I've just got 3 to share with you. So the first is white space, obviously made popular by Apple. No one can deny that, but actually the space makes the design have a bit more breathing space. It feels more comfortable as you navigate around, but also importantly, it allows the user's attention and eyes to focus on what you want them to be focusing on, rather than cramming the page with so much content that they're not quite sure where to look. So this is obviously a constant battle between designers and clients, but one which is really important to understand because it will have an impact on your website's experience. Now, the second design trends that we're seeing growing is actually the use of gradients. And don't worry, you haven't gone back 10 years in time. It is still 2022 at the moment, nearly 2023. But gradients are coming back. And actually, they're coming back with some quite bold color palettes. Now, we can do it in a number of ways. So you could implement it like this screenshot where there's a static gradient going throughout the background. You can also integrate it with a slight animation where the colors are slightly kind of moving in the background, again, without being gimmicky. Now, we'd encourage you to have a look at gradients and how they could be brought into your website design just to lift the whole feeling of the site. And the third design trend, which is really starting to take off now, is this whole split screen layout. Now, obviously, it was made popular initially by kind of e-commerce websites where they would have an image maybe on the left and the text and price on the right, but that's now exploded. And we've got this kind of split screen layout coming into all parts of websites, including forms, which is quite an interesting addition as well. So again, you might want to consider how this kind of layout might come into your website and how that actually works practically, because obviously you can have each pane scroll independently, or one pane could be locked and the others could scroll. There's lots of ways to do it, and you can have lots of fun with it, but it's a really nice design trend which you could incorporate. Now, moving on to our next must-have is accessibility. Now, here's just some screenshots as to how you could go about implementing this. So the one on the left is like a pop-up, which allows the user to change contrast and font size on the website. The one on the right is how that can be implemented into a web app and through to mobile devices to allow screen readers to read the content. Now, the big thing I would just want to mention is this is not just for public sector websites. So if you're sitting there thinking, this is not necessary for my website, I would really encourage you to think again. We want to really bang the drum for making all websites accessible to the widest possible number of users, okay? Now, it is, there are industry standards for this, so you can have a look at what we've put on screen here, which is the WCAG 2.1 guidelines, and you can have a look at those to see what you need to do to make your website compliant. But really important to understand that not everyone browsing your website will be able to browse all aspects of it. And sometimes if they have maybe a visual impairment or a hearing impairment, then we need to do some things to make the website accessible to those. So really important to take this point on board and to do all that we possibly can to make our websites accessible. Now, the next must-have is related to accessibility, and it's called dark mode. So you will have seen, I'm sure, dark mode being put into all of your apps and your kind of devices, mobile devices especially. And this is where just the colors are inverted when maybe the kind of gets into late into the evening, or you can actually toggle it on permanently. But this is becoming a standard for websites now, as that trend comes from app into website. So this is something which we feel more and more websites should have, because it's a good point for an accessibility point of view. It's a big tick in the box to allow people to change the contrast, but also it often looks really cool, right? So when you invert the colors of your website, if you ever do that, it does look really nice. That's just a personal preference, of course. But also there have been studies to show that it saves battery life on mobile devices and other things like that. So there's lots of advantages to having this. And there's also lots of ways that you could implement it. So for example, this could be a toggle that you allow the user to toggle on and off, like you just saw in the video example on the previous slide. Or you could say at a particular time of the day that you're going to flick over to dark mode on your website. So lots of ways to do it, but really a really good feature if you want to put that into your site. Now we're moving on to the second half of of this talk, and this is all about marketing and experience. So we're going to go into point number 12. Hopefully I'm not going too quick. I appreciate there's a lot to get through in this session, so hopefully you're kind of still all with me. So let's go into the second half and have a look at our first point, which is the evolution of SEO. So this is the 12th must-have. Now, really important to note that SEO evolves really, really frequently. Okay, so Google make hundreds of changes to their algorithm each year, and SEO isn't something which you kind of just do as a one-off piece of work and then say, right, I've covered that, that's done, tick in the box, move on. It's something which evolves all the time, and it's something which you need to stay at the forefront of, or your SEO partner needs to do that. So a couple of things to note. So there's an increased importance on what we call snippets, knowledge cards, and graphs, and also this people also ask box in Google. Now, some of this gets a little bit technical, so I won't go into the detail, but suffice to say that you can put tags on your website to surface more information to Google, to allow Google to index your website in more places. So this helps when it comes to things like if you ask Google for a recipe, or if you were to ask Google a question and it gives you some answers. All of these kind of things which are moving us towards voice search and other things like that are now becoming a really important part of SEO. The other thing that we're seeing is a shift towards non-keyword based search. What does this mean? It kind of means that we're slowly moving away from just having traditional keywords, and actually we're moving more towards one or two things, either more long tail keywords, which are more conversational, or secondly, allowing Google's AI bot to actually determine the keywords from the user's intent. Now, this is a little bit scary because it's kind of a bit more of a hands-off approach and giving the reins over to Google. But actually, we are seeing some really good results with that when it comes to paid search. But when it comes to organic search, then yes, more conversational keywords is where you need to move towards. And then the final point here is, is obviously that shift towards local content. So more and more searches are asking for the user's location in the browser. And if they click allow to that, then Google will know that they're based in a particular town or city and start to provide more localized content to them. Now, this is really important to understand so that you can be ahead of that curve and make sure that you have content which is relatable to maybe your local area. Now, stemming off the evolution of SEO is page speed. And page speed is obviously a massive ranking factor. One that will kind of often make or break a website. Now, we've actually spent weeks and weeks and weeks of a developer's time working on our own page speed on our website. Suffice to say, it's still not complete, okay? So every time we get to 99 and 100% in Google's page speed tool, we pat ourselves on the back and think we've done a great job. And then a few weeks later, Google have slightly evolved their algorithm or moved the goalposts, and then we might be back down at 85%, and there's more to do, right? So this has always got to be worked on, but really important. Now, the first point here is actually about kind of forgetting this whole 3-second rule. You know, back in the day, people used to say people would be happy to wait 3 seconds for a website or a page to load. But actually, as time goes on, we're getting less and less patient. So it's really important to understand that 3 seconds shouldn't be our benchmark. We should be looking for websites which load very quickly, and I would argue within a second, potentially 2 at most, to actually really start to be up there with some of the top players. Now, we know this is an important ranking factor, so it has to be a priority for us. So if this is something you're not working on at the moment, I really encourage you to have a look at that. A really easy way to start looking at it is just to put your website address through the Google PageSpeed tool. You can just find it doing a Google search, and ultimately that will give you a score out of 100, and it will also give you some tips and tricks on how you can improve the page speed of your site. Now, you can satisfy this obviously by this mobile first design approach as well that I talked about earlier. So if you take that design approach, in theory, you should have a better page speed at the end of it. But as I've said, that's not the end of it. There's still always more that you can keep doing. Now, the next point is all about a personalized user experience. Now, I talked earlier about kind of how you might have dynamic content on the website. And this point is slightly different because it relates more to allowing people to choose the experience that they get on your website. Now, again, I'm going to use BBC News as an example for this because they allow you to create a My News section and pull in information that you want to see and read about, and they allow you to do that manually. So this is all about understanding that in this instance, users aren't all the same, and we need to recognize the fact that actually your website's experience can be evolved based on what they want. So we actually, for example, built one website where it was important for the user to choose which social media channel that they wanted to see, because not everyone engages on the same channel. So if they're kind of saying, oh, connect with us on Twitter, here's our Twitter feed, etc., but the user doesn't use Twitter, it's a complete, alien topic, right? So we actually ask the user, which social channel do you use most? And then we serve them and recommend that they follow us on those channels moving forward. So that's just one way in which you can personalize the experience of that site. Now, my next point is all about landing pages. Now, please tell me you've all got landing pages on your website. Hopefully you do. I've got a video here just of the Apple Watch and the landing page that the Apple have got for this product. Now, suffice to say, it's really engaging. As you scroll down the page, there's a lot of animation and video and stats and testimonials and all these things which pop up. But it's highly engaging because ultimately what they want to do is sell you the story, sell you the dream, and get you bought into the brand. And that's really what a good landing page should do. So we really recommend that you're setting aside landing pages for specific campaigns with a specific audience in mind. And really, the more niche and targeted you can make those, the better. So think about this from a user's point of view. If they've done a search in Google for a particular service or product, they then see your result on a search engine results page, which within that copy is relevant to them. They click on it and go through to your landing page, which is hyper relevant to what they've searched for and what they're looking for. That journey is what the user will really engage with. And it's also what Google wants to promote and what they want to rank higher. So this has got lots of benefits if you can get your landing pages right. Now, obviously, by doing that, the outcome should be a higher conversion rate for you. So you should have a much better performing campaign and website off the back of this. And then just a final kind of little note here is if you haven't already, it's really worth integrating these landing pages with your CRM so that you don't have any sort of manual process when it comes to taking out that data and following up with those users. Now, call to actions is the next point. Here's an example as to a pretty brash call to action when it pops up in your face. Now, that's obviously a very confident way to do it. And that, again, is not going to be for everyone. But actually, it's really important because this is so often forgotten on websites. We sometimes forget that the purpose of the website is for people to find out more and then inquire, or download a resource, or drop us a call. Whatever that call to action is, it needs to be obvious and it needs to be clear. Now, we wouldn't necessarily promote a really active call to action in terms of like, buy this, because that can be a little bit overwhelming. But actually, what can be useful is those softer, more passive actions. So things like download this information or read this or sign up to that. Those are far more engaging. They will get far more clicks. And obviously at those points, you can gather the user's data as well. So that's really important. And I'm just going to leave, just because of time, I'm going to leave you just with one other point, which is what we call our look away from the monitor test. And this is just quite simply put, look away from your monitor and then have a look back at your website. and ask yourself, what did my eyes get drawn to first? Now, if that's one of your call to actions or something else which is very important on the page, then you've done a really good job from a design and UI perspective. But actually, if your eyes aren't drawn to that, and actually you're not quite sure where to look, then that should cause you to look or relook at your design and maybe move things around to make sure that the user's attention is drawn to the right places. Now, moving on to number 17, this is enabling voice search on mobile devices. So it's not going to surprise you that obviously the kind of likes of Siri and Alexa and Google are obviously taking off and have been for the last few years, and people are engaging with them more now than ever. But obviously it's really important that we make sure that our websites are aligned for that as well. So I talked about earlier in the evolution of SEO, the fact that our content needs to be more conversational and we need to target more long-term keywords. And that's related to this point. But actually, this is slightly different in that actually what we'd encourage you to do at the moment is to start bringing through a voice search on just mobile devices and track the performance of that. So how does that look in reality? In reality, it means that when you access your website on a mobile device, if you click on the search option, you don't just allow the user to type in what they're looking to search for, but you also allow them to click on a microphone icon, which would enable the microphone on the mobile device and allow them to speak in their search. And then the search would go off and return relevant results. Once you've done this, track that. Track how many people engage with that button, how many searches are happening, and then from that data, make more decisions as to how you can go further down this path of incorporating more voice search features on your website. So this is very much like a baby step, but really important to maybe kind of move in this direction so that you don't get left behind as this continues to grow. Now, I mentioned the growth in the chatbot market, so it was inevitable that I was going to get to this, right? So number 18 of our 23 must-haves is the use of a chatbot. Now, we've all seen chatbots on websites, and I can fully understand and appreciate the fact that actually this is a bit of a Marmite topic. There's a lot of people who hate to engage with a chatbot. But also we have to be real about the fact that they are used across many customer service businesses now. And actually people have to start engaging with them as they continue to evolve. Now, really important, if you are going to use a chatbot on your website, it needs to be human, right? You need to allow the user to have a conversation with this bot. And actually, if that doesn't work out, give them the ability to then speak to someone in a real person using live chat. We really recommend that that is always a second option, because I think the frustration comes from the fact that if you don't get the answer you're looking for from that bot, then there's a kind of closed door if you then don't offer live chat as a secondary option. So make sure you're testing and gathering data. If you do have a chatbot, always evolve and pivot based on the data that you gather. But if you haven't got one at the moment and you are thinking about it, we would encourage you to put that onto your site and to test the results. Now, number 19 is all about advanced tracking. And what I'm talking about here is not necessarily just kind of having, Google Analytics installed on your website. I'm pretty sure most people could say, yeah, we've got analytics set up. But actually what I'm talking about here is really taking your tracking up to the next level. So this is about really setting up all parts of Google Analytics. So maybe kind of goal tracking or e-commerce tracking and other things like that. Also then installing other tools such as Hotjar, which can do things like heat mapping and record how users interact with your website. And then really then from all of that data, you can then start making informed decisions based on how people are interacting with your website. So we've had lots of instances recently where clients that we kind of partner with are allowing us time to look over this data and make informed decisions to improve the website. And so often it can be the simple things which come up from this data, but actually, making that change, which is quick, can have great results. So really important, if you have got Google Analytics installed, consider whether you've got everything set up correctly, and goal tracking and e-commerce tracking and other tools like Hotjar. If not, put those things in place, give it a few months to gather data, and then start making more informed decisions about how you can evolve your website. If you want to go to the pinnacle, you could implement some live dashboards, which I won't touch on now, but another great way to learn from data in more real time. And then I'm going to leave you with a little tip, which is, if you haven't already, we are really recommending to our clients that they migrate over to Google Analytics 4 as soon as possible, as the Universal Analytics, as it's known, that we probably all use at the moment, is being retired next year. Now, talking about things to plan ahead for, we need to also prepare for the cookieless world. I'm sure this hasn't escaped you that Google and others are obviously kind of reducing the amount of data that marketers can tap into. And one of these changes is actually moving to a cookieless world. Now, there have been dates set for this, and obviously they've been pushed back a number of times, because actually there's a huge amount to consider in this topic. And Google describe it actually as an opportunity to reset the industry, which is an interesting and controversial statement. So what do you need to do? Well, actually, at the moment, there isn't clear guidance on what we're going to have to do, because this hasn't got to that stage yet. So I'm raising this point today because this is something we're going to need to consider next year. But one of the things that you might need to do is actually change your tracking from being browser side to server side. Now, I'm not going to get into the technicalities because it'll bore everyone, but ultimately, suffice to say, it's worth a conversation maybe with your agency or developer on how you might be able to implement that. And obviously, this whole loss of third-party data is a risk to your marketing strategy if you heavily rely on third-party data. So start now shifting your marketing strategy to make you more reliant on first-party data, which is data that you gather yourself from your website. So I'll leave it there because that's a technical topic, but one that we can always pick up at another time. Now we're coming into land, and this 21st point is about progressive lead forms. Now, a progressive lead form is where you land on a website on the first visit, and you might be presented with a form which has only got maybe 2, 3, 4 fields. You enter that information and you might leave that website. On the second visit, it's going to remember what you've entered, but ask you for a little bit more information. Now, the benefit in doing this is that ultimately you don't overwhelm the user with a really big form when they first kind of go onto your site. You just want the bare basics at that point. You want maybe name and email address, or name and company and email. You want absolute bare minimum at that point. And what does that do? It removes the barrier for that user, and it encourages them to complete the form, because it's not going to be a particularly challenging thing for them to do, as opposed to giving them a form with 20 fields. That information will then drip feed into your CRM, and then your CRM and website will recognize when that user comes back to the website and ask them for more information. And it's a great way to drip feed your CRM with more information as time goes on. So really worth having a look into this. And it's great for kind of lead generation forms if you've got those on your website, but also for other forms across the whole site this can be used for. A good starting point, if you're looking to implement this, would be to approach your CRM provider and to see if this is actually something they support and can help you with. And then obviously alongside your CRM provider, your agency or developer could help you implement this. Now, similar to this point is number 22, which is how do we present these forms on the website? And this trend is all about having the form take over the full screen rather than just a particular block or element on the website. Now, the advantage of doing this is that you can vastly improve the experience by having a much cleaner form. It's much clearer for people to see just one field at a time, or just 2 or 3 fields at a time, and let them flick through that until they've completed the form. It also removes distractions. So they're not reading things on your website and being distracted by maybe another call to action. They are solely focused on completing that form at that time. So if you haven't kind of thought about full screen forms before, maybe have a think about how you could implement those on your website. And again, just to leave you with a quick top tip, which is if you're looking to integrate with a third party to do this, then a company called Typeform are absolutely leading the way in terms of form interfaces and how to create and manage your forms. So have a look at Typeform and how that might be able to integrate into your site. Now, the 23rd must-have, our final one, is having an app-like experience. Now, let me just show you an example of this. You can see this website has a app-like navigation. So it's got fixed buttons across the bottom and the top, and the way that you interact with it just feels very much like an app if you were to use that on your phone. Now, obviously, we know that apps are exploding and everyone's very used to using them and they understand how they react. So it's no surprise really to see that all of that experience and expectation is then migrating over to our websites. And that's where things like dark mode that I mentioned earlier are coming into play. It's this crossover between the app world and the website world. Now, obviously, users are really familiar with navigating around apps, which is also why a lot of website navigations mimic how you would navigate around an app. And ultimately, what this does is it just creates a more engaging and tactile experience when you're actually browsing around the website, and one which will probably last in your mind longer than someone who hasn't considered this kind of experience on their website. Now, this is a big topic in itself, but I think I've left this to the end purposely because actually a lot of what I've talked about today wraps up into this point, which is things like dark mode and accessibility, full page forms, navigation. All these things can be wrapped up ultimately by this last point, which is making your website feel slightly more like an app in terms of how quickly it loads, what it looks like, and how engaging it is. So there's lots I could talk about. I won't go on any more though, but we can talk about that another time, I'm sure. So I just want to leave you with two things to consider. So if you're at the stage of maybe redeveloping your website and basically starting from scratch, then what you're probably kind of in need of is maybe some assistance with writing a brief, which ultimately is just a list of your requirements for that project. Now, what we've done here at Webbox is actually put together a website brief template, which I will share with you after this talk, so that if that's for you, then you can actually populate that template and it will guide you through that process and hopefully help you there. Now, if you're not in that position and you're just looking maybe to improve your website and to take it to the next level, then you might kind of want to take us up on a free website audit. This is basically something you can request on our website. And one of our team will go through a series of calls and processes to ultimately review your website from an external perspective and present back to you a number of slides on what we would recommend you do in a priority order to take your website up to the next level. So if that would be beneficial to you for either a website or PPC campaign, then please go to the link below and we're happy to do that audit. So thanks for taking the time out to listen to this topic. As I've said, I'll make sure that I share the recording, the slides, and other resources with you as soon as we can next week, once all of that's kind of been wrapped up and packaged. But for now, thank you ever so much. Really appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.